Hello YouTube, welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we're going to be going over an interesting, very interesting topic. We'll be looking at FastAPI, how to set up a FastAPI project with scalability in mind. Okay, so let's get into it. So let's look at the things that we're going to cover in this video, and then we'll go over each of them in more detail. So let's look at the first thing we're going to look at is what is FastAPI. Okay, we're going to look at what's FastAPI, what are APIs in general. We're going to look at the difference between FastAPI and other Python frameworks. Okay, we're going to also look at why do we need this video? Why do you have to learn how to set up a FastAPI project with scalability in mind? Why is this important? Okay, because that's the whole point of the video. We're also going to look at how and then go ahead and set up our project, set up our project directory, our first service, we'll add version control, or build a simple API, write some tests on it, and also build, ensure code quality. You're going to install a couple of libraries that is going to enable us to keep an eye or keep a track of our code quality, or the quality of our code. Okay, so basically let's start with what is FastAPI. So those of you who are new to the Python or API development, you are wondering, okay, what is API? What's an API? So first of all, let's look at what is an API, and then we're going to look at what is FastAPI. So basically, an API is just a program that runs on a server that basically applications running on either a mobile device or a computer can make requests to, and this database application also is connected to other applications like other APIs, databases, and other stuff like that, right? So let's say that you're trying to make a web application that's going to be like kind of a social media kind of thing. Well, you can decide to do it one way. You can decide to write a web application that's wholly integrated. Basically the UI and the back end logic are all merged into one. Something like using templates, like something like from Django. Or you can decide to write basically an API. So once you have an API, you write an API once, which is just the logic of the application, and then other programs which are like front-end applications, which can be a mobile device or a web application, can call this API, and this API will send to them the necessary data that they need to be able to basically run the app. So an API, basically you can think of it like the central part of your application, whereby it is connected to other things like databases, other APIs, but has all the central logic of your application that for other front-end applications can connect to, get the data, and be able to render that data to the user. So when you can have one API, and that one API can power a mobile device, can power a web application, and other stuff like that, right? So that's basically what an API is. So what's FastAPI? So FastAPI is a Python library that's used to build APIs, right? It's just a Python library that enables us to build APIs very simply, very fast. It supports asynchronous programming all the way from the core of it, the whole idea of FastAPI, unlike other Python frameworks that we'll look at just in a second. So that's basically what FastAPI is. It's just an application, but it's just a framework in Python that's used to build APIs, right? Okay, and over the years, FastAPI has become more and more popular. But one of the challenges that we're having with FastAPI is that there's no like one standard way of setting things up, and look at that just in a second. So let's move on to the next session, a difference between FastAPI and other frameworks. So the first one is that let's compare FastAPI with another popular library that is used to build APIs, which is Django, using the Django REST framework library. Okay, so let's start with Django. So Django is a very comprehensive and very highly versatile for building complex web applications. It provides a lot of things like templates, template inheritance, ORMs, authentication system, a user dashboard, a user management dashboard, all out of the box, right? So it's really good for writing big applications such as e-commerce applications, Facebook, kind of like, so not kind of Facebook, social media application and stuff like that, right? Django is really just good for that because it has a lot of features and has been around for a while, and it's more stable and can help. It's also developer friendly and has a lot of good community around it. So let's move on now onto FastAPI. So FastAPI is relatively new compared to Django, but FastAPI is really simple to set up. It is really fast faster than Django. Even the name FastAPI, fast, right? It has asynchronous programming built from into it all the way from the core, unlike tools like Django and FastAPI that you have to use other libraries to support asynchronous operations. FastAPI has asynchronous operation right from the core, right? So that's one of the advantages of FastAPI. It also does for you automatic documentation of your API. So if you build an API, it does for you all the automatic documentation. So things like FastAPI can be very good for building things like data applications that are very data heavy, like building machine learning backends or machine learning models, building user kind of like anything that is data intensive and needs to be fast and support asynchronous operations. But things like microservices and other stuff like that, FastAPI is probably the best over Django from my experience. Okay, so if I was building anything that is data heavy or data centered and really needs to be fast, I'll probably go for FastAPIs over Django. So that's one of the difference between FastAPI and Django, right? So that's one of the main difference. So both frameworks have their unique advantages depending on the project requirements, right? So if I was to build a web and e-commerce application, I'll probably go for Django because Django has some already like the administration dashboard is already set up for you, and you can just have to customize a bit. So it has some advantages, right? If I was to build an e-commerce platform, I wouldn't go for something like FastAPI because I would have to build my own admin dashboard, do everything from scratch, and it's really difficult. But if I was building a data intensive application that needs to be really fast and support asynchronous operations such as machine learning model deployment, I will probably go for FastAPI. Okay, so me having to mention that doesn't mean that those are the only use cases, right? There are other use cases for these two frameworks. So why is this video important? Now, the reason why this video is important is that in unlike things like Django, which has been around for a while and is more mature and kind of have a stronger community, we all follow the same structure when having a Django project, right? We all have the same views folder. Everything is in the same models folder. Everything is the same directory. Everything is well structured and easily manageable. So if I move from one company to another company and they're using Django, it's gonna be the same project directory, right? The project directory structure, and I can easily catch up and learn it, right? And understand what they're trying to do. But if you come to the world of FastAPI, things are a bit different, right? In FastAPI, there's no standard or defined way of structuring projects, right? So everybody has their own unique way of structuring project, and I've been developing in FastAPI for over 2 years right now, and I have seen a lot of people have different ways of doing things, and I've built applications and I've worked with a lot of projects in FastAPI, and you can never actually check on my channel. I also have many videos related with FastAPI, right? So there are really different project structures that you can use, and if you even watch my own channel, I have different structures that I use for different projects. But as I continue working with FastAPI, I found that hey, there are some common standards that people use, and that can be easily enables your application to scale up, run on the cloud, can be basically support scalability. That's what I'm going to show you in this video, how to set up your FastAPI project to support scalability. That's the whole purpose of this video. So let's get started with it. So the first thing we're going to go ahead and do is a project directory setup. So you need to set up a project directory. So how do we do that in FastAPI? So to do that, let's move on to the terminal. I have my terminal open right here, so you can feel free to use anything that you're comfortable with. I'm on Linux machine, so I'm going to be using the terminal. Okay, so I need to go ahead and we're going to go ahead and create our project directory. So in the project directory, we're going to have some sub files. Basically, we're just laying the structure of the different how the folders are structured, right? Instead of these other folders that you're going to do, you're going to create other subfolders and other files within them. So this is just an overview of the outer file structure. So the first thing we're going to do is to create the project structure, the project directory. This is basically the project name. So you can just go in your terminal and just say mkdir, or you can just create a file, whatever works for you. Okay, so I'm going to say mkdir, which is make directory. I'm going to call it my _app_ project, just like that, and then press enter. So I'm going to change directory into my my app project, project, and once I'm in there, if I do ls, you see it's empty, right? So once that's great. So once we have that created, now we're going to go ahead and create the service directory. So in FastAPI, or basically in application development, what we mean by service is basically anything that is going to take a long time, that's going to be running for long sequences of time, and that users are going to be interacting with, or anything that is computationally heavy or resource intensive, we call those services. So in this case, we're going to have a service, we're going to have a services folder, and you're going to keep all our services in there, right? So this could be different services like microservices, different smaller services working together. In this case, you're going to have only one service, and this is going to be our FastAPI API, right? So let's go ahead and change, create that directory. I'll say mkdir. So if I do right now print working directory, you can see I'm in my app _projects, right? So if I go ahead and do mkdir, I'm going to call it services services. So it's going to be a folder where we are going to have all our services in there. So if I do now print, if I do tree again, we can use the tree command. You can see that as well. Now you have our services folder. Good. So once you have our services folder, let's see what folder we also need to create. We need to create the infrastructure as code directory, which is the IaC directory. So this is going to be the directory you keep all your infrastructure as code files, like your HCL files, your YAML files, anything that relates with infrastructure, anything that you use to set up infrastructure, such as the cloud infrastructure, AWS, Azure, all that is going to be inside of this directory. So I'm going to go ahead and create that directory with a mkdir, and I'm going to call this directory, you can call it anything you want. I'm going to call it infrastructure. Okay, so infrastructure, and then press enter. So once I have that, so if I now do a tree, now you can see we have two directories. We have the infrastructure directory, we're going to have all our infrastructures, and infrastructure as code content, and then you have our services directory, we're going to have our different services, right? APIs. Good. Now that you have that, let's create the tools directory. So what is this directory all about? So this tools directory, we're going to use this directory to store basically any tools that we have. So when we're writing program, one of the things that you want to do is to keep your code dry, right? Do not repeat yourself, the dry principle. So sometimes to enable this dry principle, you may create functions, classes, and tools just like that, right? So we keep all of them inside of the tools directory. So I'm going to create that right here. Good. So let's go ahead and now let's create the lib directory. So when in the lib directory, that's basically you keep all your packages, right? So if you have written your own packages that you wish to, things like have packages on PyPy, right? So PyPy, I hope that's the right pronunciation. So we keep all those packages and libraries inside of the libs folder. So I'm going to create mkdir, right? So lib stands for library. So you keep all your packages inside of this lib directory. Good. So now we have to have this. We're going to create another directory, and this directory is going to be called the CI_CD directory. So CI/CD stands for continuous integration and continuous deployment, right? The CI/CD pipelines. Right? So whenever I'm setting a CI/CD pipeline, such as GitHub Actions, all that content, you're going to keep it inside of the CI/CD folder. So I'm going to go ahead and create that folder right here. So with CI_CD, just like that. Good. So once I have that created right there, now let's go ahead and clear the terminal, and then let me just run the tree command so you can see what we have right now. So you have the CI/CD folder where we keep all our continuous integration, continuous deployment code in there, like GitHub Actions, all that stuff goes in there. Infrastructure, where we keep all our infrastructure as code content in there, like our HCL files and other YAML files that help us define infrastructure on the cloud, like AWS, something like Terraform, all that code goes in there. And we have the lib file, which stores all our packages that we are going to kind of like have our own custom packages. Then we have our services, we're going to be basically our API in this case. And then finally we have tools. Okay. So I think it's even better to call it tools rather than tool, right? So let me just tool to tools. Okay. So let me just rename that to be tools. Okay, so good. So basically, I have also our tools folder, which you are going to keep all our basically our custom tools that we wrote to keep our code dry, and you can just use those tools within our services and other stuff like that, right? Good. So once we have all that set up, now let's go ahead and see what's next on the list. So we have created all this. Good. Now let's go ahead. Now we're going to go ahead and create our first service. So what's our first service? Our first service basically API in this case. So I'm going to go ahead and change directory into my service. And once I'm in there, I'm also going to go ahead and create a folder in there. So I'm going to call it mkdir. I'm going to call it to_do_API. So this is just a simple setup demonstration. In your case, you might be building a different API. So that's the demo. You create a folder having that API name. So if I do a tree, now we should see we have our to do in there. All right. So if I change directory back here, clear the terminal, and then I run the tree command and I press enter, you can see it right here. Right, so we have services, and our services we have the to_do_API folder, which is going to host all our services files in there. Good. So once I have, I'm going to change my directory into my services, and then I'm going to change directory into my to_do_API file folder. And if I do ls, you can see this folder is empty. Right. Once we have this done, I'm going to use Poetry again. If you don't know what Poetry is, I advise you take a look at what Poetry is. So this says Poetry. We're going to use a Python Poetry package, and this just help us to manage our install our environment and installation and stuff like that, and libraries, packages, versions, and other stuff like that. It just makes everything really simple. So you can just go to python-poetry.org and then read about it. So I already have poetry installed, so I'm going to just go ahead and use it right here to create a project. So I'm going to go ahead and simply say poetry, and I'm going to say poetry init, and then press enter. So poetry init and press enter. Package name, I'm going to just leave it to be default. Version, leave it to be default. Description, let's say FastAPI setup. You guys call it anything you want, and then press enter, enter. Would you like to define your main dependency main? Let's just say enter. And then finally, would packages, press enter. Would you like to define your development interactive? Let's enter. Package to add to for search. Let's just press enter, right? And then just press enter. Good. So that's all you have to do. So once you do that, it's going to go ahead and do. If you do an ls, you can see we have our py.toml file right here. Good. So you just press enter through all those commands. You can read through them if you want to. So yes, go ahead and added poetry to our project. So if I go ahead and open up this in my text editor, let me just go back a bit. So change directory. So I'm at the root project. So I'm going to go ahead and simply, if I do tree, as you can see right here. So we have our services. We have the to-do app API service. Inside of it, you have the toml Python file, pyproject.toml file. So I'm going to open up this in VS Code, or feel free to use any editor that you're comfortable working with. I'm just comfortable with VS Code, so I'm going to be using VS Code. So once I have VS Code opened up, let me just go give it a bit of time for this to warm up. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and reposition this a bit. So reposition it right here. Good. Okay, so I have my VS Code positioned right here. Good. So you can see we have VS Code right here. We have every of the files that you have created. So if I go under services, right, if I expand that, you can see I'm under the to-do underscore API file, and we have the toml file. If I open that toml file, it looks exactly like this, right? So you can see that toml file right there. Good. So that's basically it, what we need to do. So now what we're going to do next is basically install the packages that we need. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add some couple of packages. So we're going to go back in here, and then we're going to add those packages that we need. We install a couple of packages like pytest. We're going to go ahead and install pytest. We're going to install black. We're going to install isort and flake and all that. Okay, so let's go ahead and get those things installed. Good. So let's go ahead and get those libraries installed. So I'm going to go back in here, go back all the way in here, clear the terminal, and I'm also going to use poetry to install. So I'm going to say poetry, poetry. So let me get the spelling right. So poetry add, and I'm going to hyphen group, and I'm going to say, I'm going to add it a dev group. Okay, dev group. You can create groups using from this toml file. So I'm going to create a dev group. Instead of this dev group, I'm going to go ahead and add in the pytest. We're going to go ahead and add in pytest, basically pytest. So pytest is the library package that's going to help us to write test in Python, so pytest. And then we also are also going to install the pytest curve. So pytest curve is employed to generate reports on code, to basically generate report on code coverage. That's what it does. We're also going to go ahead and import and install black. So what does black do? So black is a Python library. That is a tool that's responsible for taking care of code formation, for formatting, right? Help us to do with the code formatting. I'm also going to go ahead and add in isort. Okay, I hope that's the right spelling, and it's going to help us to deal with making importations much easier. You're also going to go ahead and add in you're going to add in flake. So flake 8, right? So flake 8, what is simply flake 8 help us to do is simply help us to check compliance with PEP 8 convention. So if you ever work with Python, we have this compliance thing called PEP 8. So flake just help us to make sure our code is in compliance with that. You're also going to go ahead and install bandit. So bandit is just going to help us to check for vulnerabilities within our code, right? Check for vulnerabilities. You're also going to go ahead and install safety. So safety is also going to help us check for vulnerabilities within packages that we're using within our code. So bandit help us check for vulnerabilities within our code, safety within packages that we are using, right? Vulnerabilities in packages. So once I have that sorted, typed in there, I'm going to go ahead and press enter. And poetry, okay, we could not find. Okay, so I need to change to the right directory, service to do. Okay, so once I'm in there, I'm going to go ahead and run that command once more. So poetry is going to go ahead and install all this inside of our poetry environment, right? So all that is going to get, let me just go back right here. All that is going to get installed right inside of this file. So let's give this a bit of time, and depending on how fast your internet is, yeah, that's how fast it goes. So while this is going on, one thing you can also move ahead and do is that we're also going to go ahead and add a GitHub repository. Okay. Okay, so now to do this, what we need to go ahead and I need to go ahead, I need to go back inside of my browser right here, and I went to my GitHub repository. So you need to have GitHub installed. You need to have a GitHub account. So I simply went ahead and click on new repository. So I need to fill in this to create a new repository. So I'm going to say FastAPI underscore scalability underscore in underscore mind, just like that. Okay, and I can call it tutorial, something like that. Okay, you can call it anything you want, and you can give it with FastAPI setup with scalability. Let me get the spelling of scalability in mind, just like that. Okay, so once I have that, I can go ahead and add it. I don't want to add anything. I just want to go ahead and make it, and you can also choose whether it is a private or a public. I just created a public repository. So once I have that, I can click on create repository, select okay, choose owner. Okay, choose this, right? I also recently attached I joined an organization from my university, so that's why I'm getting that. So I'm going to make it a public repository, and then finally create this repository. Okay, once this goes through, you have done, you've created a repository right here. So we're going to go ahead and add this into our project, right? So let's go back in here, inside of here, and then let's go, so you can see all these libraries have been installed under the dev group. Okay, so good. So once you have all that, I'm going to create a terminal, and we need to go ahead and change directory to the roots. Okay, so once I'm in here, where you have this, I can even do the tree so you can see where I am exactly. So this is where I am right now, at the root of the project. So I'm going to go ahead and do a git init right here, a git init. So once I do git init, it's going to create for me an empty git repository locally on my computer. So once this is done, good, I create a terminal, and I'm going to simply touch .git ignore. So this git ignore file, if you go back in here, it's going to be this file right here, and we're going to keep anything that we want to ignore. We're going to keep it in here. Okay, so now let me just go back in here and get that. If you go back to this website, it's called toptal.com developers, and then finally from here I'm gonna leave. You can just type .gitignore.io in your browser, and you should get access to this link right here, to this page. And then once you're in here, I'm going to type in Python because we're using a Python programming language, and then finally press enter, press create. Okay, click on the create button, and it's going to generate for you this right here. So I'm going to copy all that and then go back inside of this file right here, and I'm going to go ahead and paste everything I just copied. And that's just going to go ahead and make sure that we ignore any unnecessary files. We don't, like this one, we don't push it into environment. It's getting ignored because it's just our environment folder, right? You don't want that in production, so we ignore it, right? So you're going to ignore anything that is not really necessary. Okay, so that's basically what this git ignore file does. Okay, so once we have this, and now we need to go ahead and right now we have created a local git repository. So we need to link this local git repository with our repository that we just created. So you can copy this command from here, copy it, and simply go back in here and to your terminal, and then simply add it and press enter. That should now connect your local git repository to the remote git repository. Good. So once we have that connected, we are good to go. So now let's go ahead and add everything. So git add, and then if you can say hyphen capital A, and that's going to add everything. You're going to do a git commit, and git commit hyphen m, passing a message. You're going to call it created, let's say created to do underscore API service. That's all you have created so far. There's an empty service, and then press enter. So once we have that, then you're going to see so git push origin, and you're going to push the master branch. Press enter. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and push the code to our master branch. Okay, and once that goes through, if I go back in here to my GitHub repository online, and if I click on this, right, or you can refresh the page, whatever works for you. And once you can see, I have the services, and the other folders I ignored because they're basically empty folders, right? So right now you can see this all that we have, right? Good. Okay, so once we are good, we have now been able to add a remote git repository to our project, and you have basically done our first commit, right? So good. So now let's go ahead and simply create now our simple API that you're working with. So good, this is the API right here we're going to create. So if I go into to do right here, right, I'm going to go ahead and create a couple of files. So the first thing I need to go ahead and do, you're going to create a new folder underneath this one. You're going to create a new folder, and you're going to call it backend underscore API, just like that. You can create call it anything you want, but I'm going to call mine backend underscore API. So once I'm in there, I'm going to go ahead and add a file, and this file is going to be called init__init_.py file. Okay, so inside of this file, what you're going to go ahead do is going to be an empty file, so we close it for now. And then inside of the main backend _API file, we're going to create a file in there called main.py. So main.py file. Good. So once we have this main.file created, again, just ignore this. I have GitHub Copilot connected to this, so just ignore it for now. Okay, so once we have this file created, inside of this file, we're going to go ahead and add in a couple of content. So I'm going to go back in here and go to the official FastAPI documentation, which is this right here, right? So you can just read through the documentation and see how you can install everything. So what I want to do is just copy this piece of code right here, copy that, and then move back into my terminal, into my VS Code, and then paste that inside of the main.py file. So this is just a simple created a FastAPI instance, and then we say saying if you go to / it's going to return to you this dictionary, which is hello world, right? Good. So that's basically what we are trying to do right here. Again, I'm not going to cover how to build APIs from scratch. I have other video courses on that. Okay, so I have a whole detail on video on that, to be building an authentication system with database connectivity with MongoDB. I use writing GitHub actions and all that. It's all on my channel. You can check that out. In this video, I'm just showing you how to set up a project directory, right? A project setup that can be used, that can be scaled to run on the cloud and other infrastructures like that. Okay, good. So once I have this done, to run this, we need to install a couple of things. So if you go back to the official documentation right here, you can see it suggests for you a couple of things that we need to install. So let's go ahead and install those things, and then we can use this command to run our application. So I'm going to go back in here into my terminal, and I'm going to use poetry. Okay, I need to go ahead and change directory to where my file is. Okay, so change directory to services, to do, and then right there. So right there, I'm going to say poetry add. So I'm going to say poetry add, and the file I'm going to add in here is going to be FastAPI, and then I'm going to call uvicorn. You're also going to install uvicorn, which is the server that enables us to run this. So I'm going to httpx, just like that, and press enter. So good. So once we have pressed enter, this is going to install for us FastAPI, uvicorn, which is a server that enables us to run our FastAPI application. It's also going to install for us httpx. Okay, so if you go back into your terminal file, you should find all that installed here. In this case, we didn't keep it under the dev environment, so everything we should have kept that under the dev environment. Okay, so my bad. But anyway, it's still gonna work. So once we have that done, what you need to do now is to run this app, right? Okay, to run this app, we're going to say poetry, and then we're going to say run, and then we're going to say uvicorn, which is the library that you just installed, which is the server that enables us to run FastAPI application. So app, and I'm going to -- reload. So main is the name of the file that you're working with, which has the app instance, right? So the name of the file, which is main, and the app instance is called app. So main, which is the file name, and then the app instance, the FastAPI instance, then run that. So now this should now start the development environment, and you can see it's running right here. So you can see could not import module main. So we are getting an error if they could not import module main. Let's go ahead and actually test this out if it's working. So test this out in the browser. So you can just simply copy this link right here. Let me move it onto this browser instead. Okay, so now that I have it open here, you can see it's not working right here. And if I go back right here, it's saying that you're missing the main module, and that's true. So if I exit this out, and if I do ls, you can see we don't have any main file right here. So we need to change directory into this, and in here you have the main file. So now let's run that command from this point in our directory. Okay, so if you run it from here, now everything should work as it intended. So if I go back in here and then back into my browser, and if I refresh this, now we should be able to get access to our simple API that just returns a simple hello world message. So you can see it right here, right? And you can with one of the advantages of FastAPI is also provide you with automatic documentation. So if I go ahead and click on go ahead to docs, you can see I have the Swagger UI right here, and you can just click on it right here and test it out. So yeah, if I go ahead and simply test it out, and if I click execute, it should turn to me hello world message right here. So that's basically how this thing works. Good. So we have basically set up our fast service, which is just a simple API. Right. Good. So that's basically it. And one thing you can also do is that you can also go here and simply use redoc. Redoc. I think it's called redoc. Redoc. Yeah, just redoc, not redox. Redoc. So this also provides you the redoc documentation, which is another way of documenting APIs, which FastAPI comes or gives you right off the box. See, we have not done anything to achieve to get all these interfaces right. It's all provided for us automatically. So good. So that's one of the advantages of having using FastAPI, right? So we talk about advantage of FastAPI and Django as well. So you can see this is one of the advantages of FastAPI. Good. So once we have this running, what I want to go ahead and do next is simply we are going to go ahead and write our initial test. So we have talked about version control, added version control. We have created a simple API. So now we're going to go ahead and write in our simple pytest. We're going to write our simple test using pytest. So there are different types of tests that you create. You could write unit test, which just test some unit of your application. You can write integration test. You can write end-to-end test, okay, or E to E, E to E, right? E to E tests and other stuff like that. So what we need to do, go ahead and do. We need to go in here. So where this file is, right? We need to go in here and then simply create a file. We need to create a file in there called tests. And inside of this test file, that's we're going to go ahead and keep in our different test components. So we need to go ahead. So inside so we need to create a folder called test inside of your backend applets folder. And then we will need to add in a couple of code content in there. So we need to go in here. So under the to-do is right there. We need to create another file called tests. And instead of tests, you're going to have our tests incorporated in there. So let's get to that. So I'm going to go in here and then add a new folder. I'm going to call this folder tests. So we're going to keep all our tests in here. Okay. So if I go back in here and close this up, clear the terminal, and if I do a tree, let me just go back. Okay, go back again, and if I do tree command, you can see we have this right here. We have the test right here. Good. So what we want to do inside of here is that you want to create a bunch of files inside of under the test folder. So the first I'm going to create is going to be __init __.py file. Good. And then finally from there, you're going to go ahead and create another instead of that, you're going to go ahead and create other files inside of it, right? So we're going to create a new folder in there. So the new folder, is going to be called we're going to first start with the unit test. So we're going to create a folder called unit, and instead of that, we need to create another file in there called __init __.py to make this a Python package. Okay, and you're going to also go ahead and repeat this process again with another file called integration. So integration, we're going to have all our integration tests, and the init, you're going to also make this on a package by creating an __init __.py file in there. Good. And then you're going to repeat the same thing one more time. You're going to create a folder, and this is going to be called the E to E. So E to E. So we're going to keep all our E to E testing right here. So you need to make this a Python package again. So it's __init __.py, just like that. So that's it. So that's basically it. So if I go back in here, create a terminal, we have done a lot. So let's see, look at it. So now this is our tree right here. Perfect. So once we have this done, I think I made a mistake right here. I think I skipped one file. Oh, it's right here. So good. So you have the init file right here. Good. So that's what we need to do to be able to create that file, that structure. Good. So once we have that structure, what you're going to go ahead and do is you're going to go under, you're going to go ahead and create two files. So under integration tools tests, you're going to go ahead and create another folder in there called test _backend API. So under integration test, right, you're going to create another folder. You're going to call it test _backend _API, just like that. Press enter, and inside of there, you're going to create two things. You're going to create an __init __.py file. Good. And in the same folder, you're going to go ahead and create another file, which is going to be called, you're going to call it test _main.py. Okay, so make sure that all your files that are going to contain test are actually setting the name test. Okay, because this is, you're using pytest, and pytest has a naming convention. And if you are not familiar with that, you can check that out on my channel. I have a video on introduction to pytest. Okay, I'm not an expert in writing tests anyway, so let me just let you know that, that off the bat. Okay, good. So once we have this done, you're going to go ahead and write a couple of tests in here. So good. So under this file right here, right, this file, you're going to go ahead and import pytest, just like that. pytest, we're going to go ahead and also import. We're going to say from starlet, which is what FastAPI is built upon. You're going to the test client. I'm going to go ahead and import the test client just like that. Test client. Okay, good. So once we have those two imports done, for some reason it's failing to, okay, it's picking it up right now. So I'm going to say from backend underscore API dot main, I'm going to go ahead and import the app instance. So I'm going to use the Copilot right there. And also going to say, we're going to create now a feature. So basically a feature is just something in Python that is called every time, right? So I'm not going to explain much about that. Okay, this is not like a introduction to kind of like PyTest tutorial. So I'm just going to keep everything really simple, okay? Because you might decide to use a different testing framework. So I'm going to create a client. And you're going to simply go ahead and return the test client right there. Good. So I'm also going to have def, and I'm going to be, this is going to be test underscore base underscore route, and basically test that right there. So basically what you're simply going to do is just you're trying to call this right here, and if you're going to assert if it turns to us a 200 is okay status, because if I go back here in the terminal and if I scroll down, we can see you're getting back a status of 200. Okay, so that's what you're checking for. If it returns to us at 200, okay, means that is back, the back end is working fine, and the message that you expect from it is this hello world message, right? Right, good. So if it answers that message back, that shows that everything is working fine, right? Good. Okay, so now that we have that test written right there, you can also add documentation to this test, and documentations make things much easier to understand for everyone, right? So the first thing you're going to add is the they are given ways you can write documentation. So the first thing you can use is you can use the give keyword. So the give keyword describe the initial condition or context under which you are writing a test. So given a FastAPI, given a FastAPI application, that can be the given. We can also have when you can also, you can just use this to complete this. When the dash route is requested using a get method, what happens? Then check the response is valid. True, that's basically what you're doing. And then checking the response is valid is by checking if this is 200 using the assert keyword right here. So once we have that test written, good, we are ready to go. So if I go back into my terminal right here, okay, so if I go back in here, clear it, and if I go ahead and run the 3 command again, so that you can see the whole structure of everything that you have done so far. So good. So that's basically what we need for the integration testing right there. So you have the backend API, which has the init file and also the main this file right here, right? This main file. Good. So that's all we need to do. So once we have that done, we can go ahead and simply run our test. So we need to go to service underscore to do file. So I'm going to direct into services and then to do. Once you're in there, if I do ls, we have the test folder in there, right? So now we're going to simply say poetry, and then we're going to run, and we're going to simply say pytest, and then finally we're going to use tests, which is the folder right there, the test folder, which is this one right here. You're going to get the integration test and simply press enter right here. So now this should now run for us all the tests and then return to us the final output that we get back. So we can actually pass in different flags for this. So we can see our test pass. So we can actually pass in different flag like the verbose flag and all that. So you can see now our integration test went through and everything now is successful, right? Good. So that's basically how you can write tests and then set up your application. So now we have set up everything. We have written a test and our test works fine. So now you're going to go ahead, and this is what you have done so far, right? Your project tree should look like this. Now you're going to go ahead and look at code quality. So it's also good to always keep an eye on your code to make sure that you're having good quality code. So how do we do that? So to do that, actually very simple to do. You're going to use the Flake library that you just installed. So what you're simply going to do, you're going to under quality of code. I'm going to focus on code formatting. There are other things attributed to quality of code, but I'm going to focus on code quality and the code formatting using Flake. So once I have that cleared, I'm going to simply go ahead and create a file, and I'm going to go back in here. Let me actually create it in here because it's much easier to use touch dot, and I'm going to use Flake. Okay, so make sure you keep an eye on which directory we are in. So I'm going to use Flake 8 right here to create an empty file, and then you're going to add in a bunch of code content. So good. So inside of the services underscore to do, that's why I created this dot Flake file. So if I go back in here, I should see that file right here. Good. So once I have this file in here, you can go ahead and simply write in a bunch of things to check for us the code quality. So we say flake 8, okay, flake 8, just like that. And you're going to go ahead and use max underscore line, and max, you're going to say max line length, and you're going to use the max line as 120. You're also going to say exclude a bunch of things, and you're going to say exclude is going to be equals to, and you're going to exclude a bunch of it. You're going to do dot git, you're going to exclude build, you're going to exclude dist, yeah, you're going to exclude migrations. You're also going to exclude dot .vnv. Okay, you can also go and exclude the pycatch file. Good. And then finally, you're going to also go and say max underscore max complexity. You're going to say that to be 10, and then doc description. So when you say doc description, you're going to use Google, or you can use Siphon if you want. But let's just use Google. So once I have that done, we are good to go. So now let's go back into the terminal. You're going to go back into this part right here, services and / to do underscore API service, and you're going to simply say poetry. Let me get the spelling right. So poetry run, and you're going to use black right here, and then simply space and then the dot. That's going to go ahead and check for us the code quality, and also going to write poetry. Okay, you can see it work fine. So poetry, and then you're going to use poetry. You're going to use run isort to help us with importations dot and hyphen profile black, just like that. So black, and then press enter, and that's going to also run. So say skip run file. Good. You're going to say poetry run, and you're going to say flake 8, and then finally a dot. So run that. Okay, so that's going to help us to check. So you can see that we have pointed out one error in our code. We have imported union, but it was never used. So if I go back in here, if I go to our main file, which is this right here, we have imported this, and which is never used, right? So we can get rid of it. Done. So once you read that, let's run this again, and let's check for the code quality to see if there are any issues with our code. Now there are no issues with our code. So good. So that's basically it. So once we have all that done, I can go back chain directory into the root of the project, do a git add, and I'm going to add everything right there. So after that, I'm going to do a git commit, and we have an m, and I'm going to say added tests and flake for code quality, for code check, just like that. So code check, and once I have that, I press enter, and everything works perfectly. I'm going to do a git push origin. You're going to push the master branch. So push the master branch, and let's see how that goes. So yeah, that runs fine. And if I go back in here, it's pushed to master branch. If I go back into my GitHub repository, if I click on this or refresh the page, I should see a bunch more of other content created in here, right? Okay, so let's give this a bit of time to load. So you can see you have it right here, and I can now expand more on this. So it looks like my internet's a bit slow. Yeah, so that you can see I have everything that that you have specified in here. So if I go ahead and click on the back end, you can see we have all the code right here. So guys, that's all for this video. We have learned how to set up a FastAPI project, including all the best practices and enabling for scalability. You can easily see you can add multiple services. In this case, you have only added one service, which is a to-do API service. You can add multiple services. You can add libs, you can add infrastructure as code, continuous CI/CD pipelines, and everything, tools that custom tools that you have written. You have a git ignore file, and everything is just set. So this project is set up for easily being easily scalable, right? So that's basically what you have done so far. So I hope you guys find value in this, and if you do so, well, one of the easiest you can support the channel is by liking the video. You can connect with me on Medium as well. I actually have articles on this as well. I have an article on this as well. So if you like reading rather than watching videos, you can find the link in the description of the video. Moving on to, you can also follow me on YouTube, which is Code with Prince, which is this channel which we are watching this video from, hopefully. You can also follow me on Twitter, aka X at Prince_Cramper. On Twitter, basically, I don't really do much there. I just post memes and post videos that I have created, and other links to videos I have created, and other things like that. Or you can follow me on LinkedIn at Prince Cramper. If you have any project suggestions, you have any idea, you want us to build anything together, you can follow me at Prince Cramper on LinkedIn, where we can do business together, right? So follow me up there and let's see what's up. So guys, thank you guys for watching so much, and I hope you found this helpful. If you did, one of the easiest ways you can support the channel is by liking this video and hitting the subscribe button. And also share this video with anyone who you think might find it helpful, your friends, family, anyone who you think might find it helpful. Again, subscribe to stay tuned for more videos like this. Thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Keep safe.